In today's episode, I was lucky enough to have on Jamie Smith. He's a strength coach, powerlifting coach, and movement enthusiast who runs a strength S&C and powerlifting gym in Melbourne called Melbourne Strength Culture. He has recently moved to his own thing to grow himself on the side and is focusing more on human movement. That's one of his passions, the biopsychosocial model and all things around training, performance and fitness. It was a great chat. As always, we talked about things like human movement training. We talked a bit about center of mass and why stretching and stuff doesn't work and why traditional forms of training don't work and how we can actually train. But one of the biggest things, and most of the things we talked about is a common theme on most podcasts, but with our own little twist. But the biggest thing that I really enjoyed and found really refreshing to hear was Jamie actually opened up on his own mental health struggles and the process he's gone through recently in the last 18 months or so with what he calls, he said he had depression and had a breakdown at work and stuff like that. So it was so good to see someone prove that you don't, to be vulnerable and talk about these things, you don't have to cry and mope around and have the victim mentality. You can actually say, hey, I'm not feeling good. This is why, and start to address it and actually get help and how much it's helped him. And he talks about that. And we also talked about like how a lot of your subjective feelings about the world and your situation impact and are a representation of the objective and vice versa. And it's not just one or the other. So it was awesome to see that. It was a great chat. Perfect for not only the athletes here who want to learn about movement stuff, but also coaches here and some of his principles behind things. Great chat. As always with the guests I've been having on, I've been pretty lucky with who I've managed to get on the podcast so far. In terms of my stuff, the pain quiz is launching extremely soon. Should be up in the next 4 days maybe, or the next few days, just finalizing a couple of bugs and tweaks so we can get that up. That quiz will find out the actual cause of your pain, ache or injury, and give you a plan of exactly how to fix it and what to do. And it's completely free. A lot of research and time and effort has gone into making this quiz as not only actionable and practical as it can be, but that it is accurate and actually helping you. So it has an algorithm and everything that assesses your questions, and it will tell you the actual cause and stuff of your pain and give you a plan to fix it. And then solo templates. Again, if you're interested in, I put a story up today about how someone replied saying, I don't know how you're making money off this. And the point is, I'm not. This is not to make money. It is genuinely to make premium quality, proper training on a proper app with demos, progressions, 3 phases over 12 weeks, any plan you want for any goal you have for only $17. Like literally, for less than 2 of the cocktails you bought on the weekend, you can get 12 weeks, which is 3 months and 3 phases of training that progresses itself. You track numbers and everything, track your weights, put in feedback and join the Solo Templates group chat to get advice and talk to like-minded people. So if you're interested in that, $17. And if you really don't like it, which I doubt none of you will, but if you don't, I'll refund it if you are. So pain quiz coming soon. Keep an eye out for that. Solo Templates, go check them out if you haven't. And Jamie plugs a bit of his stuff at the end, which I'll leave in the show notes as well if you want to learn a bit more about center mass and human movement and stuff that we talked about. And I'll put his Instagram and stuff in the bio. So enjoy the chat. And as always, any questions, let me know, reach out, but enjoy. Jamie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me on.
We finally got there in the end, had a few things on.
That's all right.
How's the golf going? Having some good swings?
Golf is going all right, man. I actually had my first on-course lesson on Tuesday night, and I learned so much, like way too much, and it's just all in my head at the moment. And I was trying some things. I've got to get out there and practice more. I think where I'm at, I'm not really going to improve much more without genuine practice. Yeah. So I'm at a bit of a crossroads, but I love it.
What's your handicap now? What's your handicap?
I'm playing off my GA handicap's 13, but it's about 15. Yep.
Yeah. Nice. How are you finding training's impacting it? Have you had to switch up your training a heap?
Not too much, man. So we run an event called Push Pull Run, which is a semi-powerlifting, semi-hybrid event. And I did that in April, and my training for that definitely impacted my golf. Like it was, my handicap started to slide a bit and I was slicing everything. I think mainly because of the bench press and just doing way too much volume of arch bench press. So since then, I've transitioned a little bit more to actually like thinking about like performance in the gym feeding into golf a little bit more. So it's changed a little bit, but the crux of it's still just trying to get stronger, trying to move well,
Mm.
good load, good proximity to failure. Like all the key principles are always there. So
Because I saw
yeah,
one of your posts where you're talking about the things that carry over to it. And that's one of the things that I hate about all the sports specific, like I'm sure we'll dive into it, is you got to train the sports specific in the gym and do specific golf stuff. But half of the time, and this is where it'd be good to get your opinion on it, especially you trying to juggle everything, is like you don't actually trying to train the sport in the gym. You're making considerations based on the sport and the positions you need and stuff, but you're not actually changing the exercise you're doing specifically. You're not trying to swing in the gym.
absolutely. Yeah. You can't really load the specific pattern of highly ballistic movements at all anyway. So um yeah, I think the biggest consideration for me is just trying not to drive too much extension in a lot of my movements. I come from a heavy powerlifting background, so my tendency is always to go hard and heavy with like pushing
Mm-hmm.
compounds within a month. Like I want to be like actually like really pushing
Yeah,
stuff, but just making sure that I'm selecting exercises that don't drive too much extension in my system because
yeah,
that is what I was experiencing with the push pull run stuff. I was just super heavy deadlift, super heavy bench press, a couple times a week on both, and it was just it was just tightening up my back, and I couldn't really rotate too much anymore. So I think that's probably the biggest consideration. But for the most part, like good training is good training. Like you want to load, you want to hit some deeper ranges of motion, push proximity to failure, like all that stuff is still in there. It's just sprinkled into slightly more advantageous positions. Yeah.
yeah. And speaking of your powerlifting background and stuff, like obviously you've got Melbourne Strength Culture and the big gym there and doing a lot of things. That's where I first heard you as one of the potties. Obviously, Angus would have posted the one I think you're on, and just such good chats, and you can see it's such a good environment there. How long you been doing that for? How did you start the powerlifting scene, and what kind of got you to where you are today?
Yeah, so strength culture, we're actually in year 7. We're nearly at the start of year 8, which is
Shit.
wild to me. I
Yeah.
can't believe that. Uh, I started very young. I was only 23. The first couple of years was just scrapping by, but after a little while, we started to make a little bit of a name for ourselves through content, mainly for powerlifting and like I'd say a more educated approach to like biomechanics more than anything, like technique and truly understanding like technique expression and why people sort of find the same common limitations in mobilities and how to overcome them quickly with just better exercise selection or small subtle changes to
Yeah.
cueing and all of that sort of stuff. So that's sort of where the powerlifting push started. That was probably after like the second year, and then we pushed really hard with powerlifting up until pretty much coming out of COVID. However, since then, we've obviously transitioned a little bit to more of just like hybrid stuff, which is
Yeah.
ultimately like what the coaches and what we all are. Like when we never identified as powerlifters. Like we weren't those type of people to be like, I'm going to do this for the next 10 years and try and win nationals and try and compete for Australia or any of that sort of stuff. Like that was just never really
Oh,
in our interest. Powerlifting was more just a hobby for us.
I thought it
And
was, yeah, mainly
like
trying to
most
get into it.
hobbies, yeah, yeah, like we did, like we took
Yeah.
teams to nationals, and we still do take teams to nationals and all that sort of stuff. But from like the coach's perspective, it was never something that, like, again, I just come back to that word identity. Like we never identified as powerlifters. Like we always just enjoyed training, enjoyed pushing strength, and enjoyed really like a more educated approach to all of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But fundamentally, like we just love training and we love exploring different fitness pursuits and doing all of that sort of stuff. So we were like, well, I think long term, going down this route of just more performance based training, we still help powerlifters. We still have lots of them in the gym and in the community, but just being a little bit more open to exploring ideas around different training strategies and styles and running. And the boys have done triathlons now. A couple of the boys did the marathon or the 10K at the Melbourne
Yeah.
Marathon. Obviously, I enjoy my golf stuff. So it's really just allowing that to be a little bit more visible
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's sort of been the transition recently. But at the core of what we do, we are still very focused on performance, whether it's
Yeah.
powerlifting, whether it's hybrid, whether it's for me golf or whatever. Like we love pushing in the gym, so yeah, we're just trying to get that open a little bit more.
And what got you into that? Like where was the time, or was there something when you were younger or something that got you into training and that, or did you just fall into it, or was it like you were doing powerlifting and then you just enjoyed it and went, I'm going to open a gym, or how did you kind of fall into that?
Yeah. So I don't know if do you know Christian Woodford,
Yeah,
WSSC?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So when I just started personal training, so I started personal training at 19, and I was working in just a smaller studio, just like a very small studio. I did some group classes, mainly dealing with. So my main clientele were like middle aged, like young mothers,
yeah. That's like the
and
standard progression to start. You
yeah,
get
the
the
standard
mums.
personal training sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And I thoroughly enjoyed coaching, and I thoroughly enjoyed personal training and helping people. And I have just a keen interest, especially in anatomy and biomechanics. Like I've always really enjoyed learning about that sort of stuff. And it was a good start for me to start exploring those ideas. But then after a couple of years, I was like, is this something that I'm going to be able to do long term? Like the typical sort of conversations young coaches have with themselves or with other people, like especially with their family. Like, is this something that I can do long term? And is this actually a
mm,
viable sort of career pursuit, or is this just a small sort of window in what I'm going to be doing as an adult? And
yeah.
that was right at the time where WSSC started to really pick up and take off. So I would have been like 21, 22. So around about 2012, 2013. And so I just went down to Woodford, and I was just like, hey man, like I'd love to learn from you. I sort of became one of his mentees, like just spending a lot of time at his gym and training at his gym. I hired one of his coaches, which was John Paul Cowkey, who is
Yeah.
one of like the OGs of tested powerlifting here in Australia, especially in the raw category.
Yeah.
So not equipped lifting. And I just hired him, and he was obviously at the time, I think he was the junior world champion at the time, and he was like, "Oh, let's start looking at barbell lifts and doing all of that sort of stuff." So I was doing Olympic lifting with him, and then he eventually was. I just really started enjoying training for powerlifting alongside him, and then he was like, "Why don't you do a comp?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I was like, "Yeah, I'll do a comp." So I did 3 or 4 comps as a junior, like 21, 22, 23, and then I took a little bit of a break. I went on a long holiday overseas, came back, finished my uni degree. I was trying to get into sports performance, so the AFL sector for strength and conditioning. And actually, I managed to get a job at Carlton, and then just for a
Oh,
number of
really?
reasons, I ended up not working there very long. But I worked in the VFL team. I worked with VFL. I was the head strength coach at Port Melbourne in the VFL, and then got into Carlton. Didn't work out for me. I went back to Woodford, and I was like, hey man, like what do you think I should do? Like, I don't think the elite sector is for me. And he was like, I think you really need to push into the private sector. He recommended that I go to America. So I ended up going to America for a 6-month internship at Cressy Sports Performance.
Yeah.
Which is an elite baseball facility in Massachusetts. I did 5 months there, finished that up, and then I did a couple of weeks with Bill Hartman at
Oh, so you did
iFast.
so. Oh, you did something with Bill
And
Hartman.
um, yeah, I spent 2 weeks with him. Yeah, this was
Yeah.
back in 2016. Bill and Mike Robertson, they were so welcoming to me. They were
Yeah.
unreal. Obviously, Eric gave him the phone call and told him I was coming across. But yeah, I still remember one of the nights with Bill. We just went to like I think it was his house, and we just played board games and got drunk, and it was just fucking hilarious.
See, I could see
Yeah,
that with Bill too. Like, and that's the thing
he's so much
about
fun.
our industry
It's
is
such a
so
nice
many.
guy.
Yeah, like so many of our industry, like, or everyone's also like in the certain communities. Obviously, you got the communities where they're all dickheads, but like even like just like talking to Angus and like all these different people you just met, they're like,
Everyone.
and you get around each other. You're like, oh, let's hop on a potty, like, and you do it. It's just like when you get in the right circle, like, and I'm starting to meet a lot of people from it too now. It's like everyone's just so welcoming and like just wants to get better and chat and hang out and stuff. And I could see that with Bill too. You could see he just want to chill out and get drunk and play games and stuff.
Yeah, he's a weapon.
And then
So
what'd
yeah,
you do
that was
from
back in
there?
2016, and then I came home and then started the gym, and then obviously helping people get stronger started to lead back into me wanting to do powerlifting again, and then it just sort of naturally flew
Yeah.
on,
How'd you
evolved from
go
there.
with your
Charlie,
powerlifting?
um, oh yeah, I did all right. I came third at junior nationals back when I was 23, but those totals would get absolutely swallowed these days.
Yeah.
And then I probably did another, I think I did four more comps from like 25, 26, 27. But then eventually just, again, I'm not a powerlifter. Like I'm just not, like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed pushing training. And I think a lot of people resonate with this is that they can sometimes feel like you get boxed into just doing squat, bench, press, and deadlift, and you don't really know how to explore and train in other modalities. And you're hesitant because maybe you're good at it, but you don't really thoroughly like deeply enjoy it and see yourself doing it long term. It can get a little bit sort of like restrictive and feeling a little bit restrictive. And that's what I was feeling like towards the end of like my powerlifting sort of tenure.
Yeah.
And then I actually took a decent break over COVID, just off training altogether. And this year it's really starting to pick back up a little bit for me. And breaking free from that sort of like boxed in mentality of just like training the heavy lifts all the time has been really good for me. And I'm starting to see like other pursuits that are available. Yeah. And that's why the brand has obviously evolved a little bit as well.
Yeah. And so many people don't, they think, oh, like, it's like the interference effect. It's like, oh no, there's no way you can and that's why I thought the push pull run was so sick, because it's like it shows you can like have people lifting all these heavy weights and then having a run after, like, and you're not missing out on anything by doing it. I think I saw that, and I was talking to Mitch as well. And even he was saying like, because he's training for it and he's gonna like do his own little one. He's gonna do, I think he's doing squat, bench, dead, and he's gonna do a try like an hour later. He's gonna do a triathlon. I was like, it's sick lovely to try those things. So
was one of the coaches here. He has a client that did that this year. Yeah.
Well, he I think he was coaching Mitch. I'm pretty sure. I think for his one, I'm 90% sure.
Oh, is this Mitch? Ex-Fizz. Ex-Fizz Mitch. Yeah.
He's my meme guy. He does my memes and stuff now.
Lovely.
But and again, like even he came through I did a couple mentorships, and you meet people through that. And I was like, oh, you're cool. Like, I want to work together. He's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
But you're talking a lot about like all your powerlifting and stuff, and you love anatomy and biomechanics and stuff. Was there a point where you were like obviously you know a lot about the biopsychosocial model, and that's something you talk about a lot. What was the point, like maybe you were aware of that, or have you always been aware of it, or was there like a point where you started diving into it, and how do you implement that with all the stuff you do?
Yeah, this is actually a big so hang on. This was actually a really big sort of mental hurdle that I had to get over. So obviously coming through my big influences, obviously Woodford to start with, but mostly Eric Cressy. I used to just consume everything from Eric when I was like 17, 18, 19. And then obviously I went and did his internship. And his influence on me and my understanding of human movement and applied anatomy was probably the biggest influence. But then from when I went to America, I started getting into PRI. So in 2016, I did 2 of their in-person events. I did an online course with them. I was obviously applying it at Cressy when I was there as well, because they had the PRI influence, which is, if anyone knows PRI, it is mainly just a purely objective biomechanical model of human movement. And then obviously when I went to Bill Hartman, this was before he really started to push compression and expansion. But before that time, he was also, and another guy called Lance Goik, they were heavily PRI sort of enthusiasts and understanding those sort of like principles and the application of that sort of stuff. So I came from this hugely biomechanical influence on how humans move and how humans perform and all of that sort of stuff. And that obviously then just bled into everything that I started creating. This was our first ever internship, and one of the students in the internship, he was just in the middle of one of the classes, was just like, hey, like, what about all this like BPS stuff? And I'd been exposed to it, but I never really looked into it. And then speaking with him regularly, and then the people that influenced that. So barbell medicine was a huge one for me. I don't know if you follow those boys, but or that group of people. But barbell medicine was a huge one, who were really pushing the BPS. Yeah, so they were pretty much. I would give them they were the first like performance driven people that really opened the doors for BPS model. So they were heavy, strong powerlifters and bodybuilders, and they came from like a medical doctor and a physiotherapy background, and they would talk openly about sort of this whole BPS sort of application around things. And then the other one was Greg Lehman, who
Yeah.
was Stuart McGill's sort of like 2IC. If anyone knows Stuart McGill is kind of like the godfather of core stabilization
Yeah.
and like limiting motion at the lumbar spine. And you only have so many flexion potential sort of reps in your lifetime. And
That's what I was
it's
about
the
to
whole
say. That's a
pink
weird
spine.
combo of
Fucking
like Greg from Stewart. That was because Greg's like massive on the biopsychosocial, all that
Or do you
stuff.
know
So
Greg's full story?
nah, I've never heard
Do
it.
you know Greg's full story of his evolution? So he was the 2IC. My understanding is he was pretty much the head researcher for Stuart McGill. So as biomechanical as you could get from a rehab perspective,
Yeah.
um, was just like in the trenches with him, like dozens and dozens of research papers and all that sort of stuff. And then Greg started to look into the other side of the world, which is this whole BPS sort of, it's not just damage that causes pain, and the subjective reality of an individual is probably just as, if not more
Yeah.
important for outcomes than the physical objective reality. So Greg started to then research the other side, and he started to go the complete opposite direction to the
Ah.
point where he was like, we have been spouting the wrong stuff. There is parts of this that's really important to understand, but going the other way, he's like, no, we're at one end of this pendulum swing.
Yeah.
He went the other way, and now he's somewhere in the middle. And I think he's actually probably him. There's a couple of people, but I would put him as one of the best versed people in understanding both ends of that spectrum. And then
Mm.
also how to actually make it applicable to helping people, because that's the crux of what we're all trying to do, is just help people, especially with pain. Like being in pain sucks, and it can really impact life and impact sort of um, all aspects of life,
Yeah.
depending on what that pain is inhibiting you from doing. Um, so yeah, Greg was someone else. So barbell medicine and Greg, and then speaking with this intern who's now a physio, and he's mad, he's awesome. But obviously learning and just starting to consume some of that stuff, I started to go through that same thing where I was like, well, I've seen this firsthand, especially with like the PRI algorithms of like, yeah, you're a left ISC or whatever you are, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you should be able to open up the range of motion and reduce pain. There's so many times where you open up the range of motion, but pain doesn't change, or pain gets worse,
Yeah.
or you can't open up the range of motion, or there's a mental block from the client, and this subjective influence of the objective reality that we're dealing with just seem to make just so much more sense to me, that we have to understand who this person is and what's going on and what their beliefs are, what their expectations are, and all of that sort of stuff is like the precursor for allowing the biomechanical stuff to actually have an impact. If you've
Mm.
got someone who's hesitant, doesn't trust you, has a changed expectation, has lived experiences of negative outcomes and all that sort of stuff, going through a biomechanical sort of stuff is probably not going to be as beneficial as maybe just good training, getting them to understand sort of their experiences a little bit better and all of that sort of stuff. Like this subjective and objective reality that we're all living in is I think we need to better understand it. I still don't think we have a great grasp of it, but trying to reconcile the two of them together is difficult. It is a challenging thing.
Yeah. And
That was a
I
big
still,
ramble.
no, that's good. No, but that's what I said. That's what I was saying before. I was like, if you're anything like me, just go on tangents, like do your thing.
Yeah.
This is what people want to hear. But yeah, I'm shocked by that. I because I've Mitchell's actually showed me one of his documents, and it was like he could. I was saying to Mitch, he could have charged like $200 for this document he put out. I think it was this guide to pain or something. It was like this full PDF of everything. What is pain? What's this? Like running through it all. But hearing that he was with McGill, it's like what the like that's like the
Where he
opposite
started.
end. Yeah, and
Yeah, that's where he started.
where are you now in it? Obviously you have like you never are one or the other, but would you say you're in the middle kind of thing, or you like let's say you're working with someone for the first time, like obviously are most of your clients now the powerlifters and stuff, or is it like now you're going into the hybrid?
All of our clients push performance. Like that's the crux of what it is,
Yeah,
whether it's strength training, powerlifting specific, or whether it's a combination of both. Like all of our whole gym is a performance based gym. Like everyone
yeah,
is pushing for performance based outcomes. So I'd still say probably 50% of our clientele are quote unquote powerlifters, but they may not compete. They just love
Yeah.
pushing SBD and peaking. Maybe they do a novice comps, or maybe they do push pull run or whatever. Like everybody is pushing strength performance in some capacity and pushing it hard. But yeah, where do I sit on that whole thing? It's just such an individual. It's just it's so contextual with who you're talking to and who you're dealing with. The way that I frame the biomechanical world now, though, is that it's for me, it's just performance. Like understanding like these internal rotation forces, understanding what positions we need to get in to produce force, understanding why mobility restrictions present themselves with mismanagement of center of mass and base of support and all of that sort of stuff. For me, that is always just performance. It's a performance lens. It's to get more from your training per se. And then if we're training well and moving well under load, and we're smart with our progressions, and we're smart with our exercise selections and all of that sort of stuff, we're probably going to, just as a result of that, improve the entire system. They start to feel better. They start to move better. They're more confident in the gym and all of that sort of stuff. And that's what bleeds into more of the BPS sort of thing, because all of that stuff is so important. So that's probably the way that I frame it more than any ever. As soon as pain is presented, though, it's really important how you communicate why you're doing certain things and all that sort of stuff. Like you can't just make the expectation that, hey, you got lower back pain. If we do 90-90 hip lifts and do some breathing and get your rib cage moving, we're going to clear that up, because it might work the first time and we may see like an acute improvement for maybe a month or 2 months. But as soon as that back pain presents itself again, or it's slightly different, and we go back to the same thing with the expectation that it's now going to fix it again, and it doesn't, all of a sudden now you're starting to go into no CBeak world and actually getting negative outcomes from the prescriptions and what you're educating and how you're wrapping it up. So most of it just comes back to like communicating and not putting all your eggs in one basket and all of that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, that's pretty much where I sit in now.
Can you just pick your mic up and just like drop it? Just like drop it on the desk. give a mic drop. Because that is probably one of the best explanations I've heard of it, in terms of, because so many people go, oh yeah, you get him in, you talk about psychosocial, assess everything, and they go through this assessment of everything, but it's like, what the fuck's the person doing in front of you? What do they say? What do they feel? What do they think? What are their goals? And then it's just like you work your way through it. It's not like this, sit down, what's your psycho? And people go too far into it. So I think that was probably one of the best summaries of it ever. And I knew you would have a good one, so I was trying to push towards it. What one of the best things is that I've also seen you explain well is, and a few people that I've talked to about this podcast have also wanted to know, is summarizing the center of mass stuff, because I've seen a couple of your reels, especially, where you explain it really well. What is your summary of that, and how do you think a lot of people could get benefit from understanding it, in terms of how to better manage their center of mass and set up exercises and stuff like that?
Yeah. So understanding center of mass is like it's like my core principle from a human movement perspective. Because before you view movement in the gym, so before you just think about squats, deadlifts, bench press, overhead press, whatever the fuck you want to talk, you could even put a hypertrophy lens on there and go like down a CASM route of like, how do we get length in a lat? How do we get length in a pec? What position, what angles, and all of that sort of stuff. Like, before you get into any of those conversations, you have to understand what the human system is designed to do. And from a human function perspective, what makes humans unique to all other animals and the evolution of the human species is that we're bipedal, first and foremost, and that we have learnt to use our arms to mainly throw things. That's how I frame it. So the third lens to that is breathing and control of respiration as a portal to impact the physiology of the system. So we can control. So this is very PRI driven, but you can control like carbon dioxide saturation within the blood to either upregulate or downregulate the autonomic nervous system and all that sort of stuff. Like I view it as a portal, breathing portal. It's a portal into controlling the central nervous system. It's not direct control, but it's a little area that we can look through and make adjustments with breathing. They're what I like to think is the three human functions of what makes humans unique to everything else. Gait cycle, bipedal, using our arms to throw shit, whether that be punches, whether that be rocks, whether it be spears, whatever the fuck it might be. And then finally, breathing. So we'll leave breathing out of the center of mass thing to start with. But from a center of mass perspective, gait cycle is management of the center of mass, and throwing is management of the center of mass. So from a gait cycle perspective, the way we move is the center of mass shifts from left stance to right stance laterally, and it pivots. It's sort of like it IRs, if you really want to talk about it, but it internally rotates around onto the stance leg. And then we internally rotate off that stance leg onto the other side. So we're seeing this management of center of mass relative to the base of support that gets us moving. The way that I frame that in the gym then is the center of mass dictates the position of all of the bones. So if the center of mass is driven forward, if we're extended, if we've got a lot of posterior compression, if you want to use Bill Hartman's model, if we've got a lot of posterior compression, the front side is open, we've got an anterior tilt, we're extended in the lumbar spine, we're extended in the thorax, we've got pressure at the front of our feet. And what that sees is the same presentation of mobility restrictions that I'm going to say 90% of people have experienced if you're a coach. Ankle dorsiflexion, range of motion problems, hip internal rotation problems, hip flexion problems, shoulder flexion problems, shoulder external rotation problems, or internal rotation problems. It's the same sort of series of mobility restrictions that present, which at the core is just the center of mass is being pushed forward in some capacity. So that's how that starts to bleed into the gym from that perspective. From the upper body's perspective, if we think about like what produces force, what generates force, what are the prime movers, we've got pecs and lats are the most important ones. They're both internal rotators. So they're both moving from a position of length in an externally rotated position, and they are generating force and generating propulsion back through towards midline, towards internal rotation. So in the same sense, how do we stretch? How do we lengthen? How do we get length in those two muscles? Well, we manage the center of mass. If we want to lengthen a pec, let's think about a throw. Rib cage comes forward, center of mass is driven forward, the arm trails, and then that's what actually allows us to then get a shortening moment of the pec. If we want to lengthen a lat, how do we lengthen a lat? The center of mass shifts backwards and the rib cage moves back. Welcome to CASM, flex the spine, get the arm out in front, all of that sort of stuff. That's how we lengthen a lat. It's just center of mass management for the upper body as well. So center of mass is the crux of it, because that's how we move. We manage and manipulate the center of mass relative to our base of support or relative to the extremities. And everything to produce force then comes towards the midline, towards the mass. And that's how we actually generate muscular force. And that whole Bill Hartman compression, internal rotation, all of those forces are just moving towards midline, which is moving towards the mass. So we manage it, we move it, and then move towards it to generate the force. So that's the crux of it. So if you don't understand where the mass is, you're always going to be behind the eight ball of trying to improve positions or.
We'll start again. You were cooking. We finished up on, I don't know where it went. You were cutting out a little bit and then you just disappeared.
I think the final point was the center of mass dictates where the bones are. So if we want to improve the position, if we want to improve force, if we want to improve tension, if we want to improve hypertrophy and all of that sort of stuff, understanding what position the mass needs to be so that we can get length. Yeah, so we can get length in a certain whatever. Choose a muscle. We can just play with the fucking. Yeah,
that's
like
what I was
it doesn't really
say
matter. Or from a strength perspective, the classic one is like a squat. But if you need to get deeper in a squat, you need the center of mass to be backwards, because when it's forwards, it closes off all of the range of motion at the ankles and at the hips that we require to get deep. So what does everyone do? They heel wedge so that we fall forward and have an area that we can move back into. They anterior load, which pushes the center of mass back. They tuck, they brace, they do all of these things, which is really just their tricks to get the center of mass to stay backwards. That's all it is. Same with a pec, lengthening the pec. Every pec lengthening position is drive the rib cage forward, drive the mass forward so that the arm is behind us. And that's where we get tension and lengthen tension in a pec. So we can apply that to movements. An arch bench press is going to be more length in the pec than a flat bench press or anything like that, which is just that everything is just a
Ways to
trick.
manipulate.
Every cue is a trick to better manage the mass. Cueing heels from another one that people don't really think about, but like everybody used to cue heels in squatting because everybody used to wear these fucking squats suits and Louis Simmons and vertical shins and all of that sort of stuff, which was an attempt to minimize the suit pushing you forward. So you had to sit back into it, keep your mass back. Otherwise, the suit is just going to throw you forward. So what is he cueing? He's cueing a vertical shin, which is center of mass back. He's cueing heels, center of mass back. He's cueing hips back, center of mass back, because the suit is trying to push the mass forward. So all of the cues is to better understand. Like it's everywhere. It's every single. It's all just center of mass. Like it really is.
This is why people go, oh, I got a tight pec or a tight this or a tight that. So they fucking,
No, you don't.
The worst one the one I hate now, ever since like learning all this stuff and going down the rabbit holes, is when I go to the gym and you'll see people warming up for a squat. They have like the banded traction on the at the ankle, and then they do the hip traction, and then I'm like, and then they set up for this squat, and I'm like, you you've wasted all. You're sitting there doing all these drills that aren't doing anything, and then you get in this squat, and then you reverse it all, and then people go, "Oh, I wonder why I'm still stiff and sore. I got to spend another 30 minutes, or I got to go buy this thing," and you just like it's in everything, like you were saying. For what is for people in the gym who have that problem, what are some, or like especially squatting, and because a lot of people, one of the biggest problems they have is, I can't stay upright. Like they always, or I can't get my knees over my toes. Like, what are your main 3 or 4 things that can dramatically help a squat, especially because that's one of the most common things, to get those better positions and actually squat properly, even if it's accessories, setup, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything lives on a continuum of load. So this is one of the biggest sort of strikes against PRI, is that it's all very unloaded, isometric, breathing, focused, and all of that sort of stuff. Like we can view that as one end of a load continuum. And then from those drills, you would have to progress into more range of motion, more speed, more force, more body segments moving at once, like all of that sort of stuff. Like they're all just continuum. They're all on a continuum, of just increasing load over time. And then eventually you get to somebody like a David Gray, who I think understands that continuum really well. And this would be my recommendation to everybody. But learning that we need to probably understand individual segments of the body and how to move and control them. So some low-level stuff for squatting. The easiest one is just a plank with a reach. So like actively driving into the ground to round your upper back a little bit, tuck your chin. All we're doing is just driving the center of mass back, but finding some abs, learning to hold the pelvis in the ribcage position flexed a little bit with some abs, breathing there, just getting some respiration going in that position, learning to tuck the pelvis with hamstrings and abs. We don't really want to squeeze too much with the glutes. If we're trying to control the pelvic position with glutes too frequently, at the end of the day, the glutes are just pushing the center of mass forward. They're trying to extend the system. We're actually trying to get some flexion into the system. So hamstrings and abs and that connection is probably going to be better, and start to feel it in low level drills. That's what a 90-90 hip lift does. That's what a plank does. And all of those low level drills. From there, it's just what you're feeling, trying to apply it in a standing position. So the easiest one is a heels elevated goblet squat. Anterior load shifts us back. Ab position is mirrored from the plank. So finding that ab tension. Again, learning to control the pelvis with your hamstrings and abs in that standing position, getting deep, feeling that depth, maintaining your pressure over your midfoot so we can actually produce force balanced in a balanced position. I made a post about this yesterday, but so yeah, planks, anterior loaded squats in some capacity, nice and deep, holding a slightly more flex position, and then trying to marry those feelings into your more performance-based things, whether they be back squatting, SSB squatting, low bar squats, or whatever. Once people start to feel them, they can just start to progress up that load continuum. But you got to start at the level that they're at. If they've got no idea about how to control their pelvis, you're probably starting on the ground with just some tucks and rolls and hamstrings, 90-90s or planks or whatever it might be. But most people get past that shit within one exposure. And then we can get them to standing and actually expressing it. Then the other side to that is, if you do have these common mobility restrictions, which is ankle dorsiflexion, hip flexion or hip internal rotation for the lower body, for the upper body, if you can't get your arms overhead or if you can't get external rotation at the arms, applying those same principles to some of your accessory movements might be beneficial. So getting some reaches in that keep the rib cage back, keep the mass back, and allow the scapula to move around the body and actually load above the head or at 45 degrees and above can be really beneficial. Doing maybe like Hatfield SSBs or something like that, where you're holding the rack in front of you. Again, we're just trying to give yourself some awareness of what's actually happening at the midline, because that's what's dictating what happens at the extremities.
Because even one of the I used to do I went through a powerlifting phase a couple of years ago, and fuck, that cooks you. Like when you were saying before, like you kind of get like in that zone of like, you kind of get not like almost burnt out from it, like you're stiff, you're sore, you're tight, you're doing all this pressing, squatting and everything. I went through that like a few years ago. But then even I think Angus was put up these videos of as a warm-up from shoulder mobility, doing like the overhead tricep extension and the curls. And that was one of the ones where it clicked for me. And you're like, when you use your body in these positions, and it's like people go, oh, I need to do, like, especially in the rehab world, it's like, oh, I do my wall crawls where yes, dislocations and stuff is different with rehab, but I would just crawl my arm up and that will fix my flexion, or I'll use a stick and push my arm up into it. But the clicks when it's like, when you actually use your arm there, like even I've noticed doing it recently, it's like already it's changed so much just because I'm actually using my body and loading it in that position. It's like you can get it there passively all you want, but like you said with the squat, unless you're actually loading it step by step by step and feeling it each way, you're never going to actually own it in that sense. And that's all that progression is.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything just lives on that load continuum, whether it be isometric, moving to actually faster movements, eventually getting to plyometrics. If you really wanted to go all the way down, that's when the jumping stuff comes in and all of that sort of stuff. Or it's a strength progression of unloaded down near the ground where things are easy, and then standing up and a small amount of load that improves our gravity management. So the anterior load shifts us back, but then also learning how to shift back under load and under a barbell and all of that. So picking up some awareness cues and some sensations that can then be applied into standing drills. Yeah.
Were you ever interested in the rehab world, or have you always just preferred the performance and that side of it?
Yeah, so I contemplated doing a physio degree in 2000, at the very start of COVID, 2000 and what was that first year? 2020?
20, yeah.
So at the end of 2019, at the end of 2019, start of 2020, I actually spoke to Quinn Hennock, who's another really good, understands, I think, both ends of the BPS and the biomechanical sort of lenses really well. I spoke to him about it, and I just sent him a couple of emails. We just went back and forth a little bit, but he mainly said that you already have the potential to do all of the things that you want to do, going to do an $80,000 degree for 2 years, having to go through all like the actual medical side of rehab and spending time at hospitals and all, like that's not actually what I wanted to do. And I think I was also just sort of running from the daunting task of learning to grow a business. Like I was struggling at that point, and I was just actually starting to make some progression with the business. But I think it was a bit like a easy route. Like, oh, maybe if I go and do physio, then I've always got this backup or something. But I've always been interested in it, but it's always, So I don't think I'd ever go and do it at all. No chance anymore. But I'm definitely interested in that world, but it always comes back from a performance-based lens.
Yeah.
Like I'm only interested in it to improve performance. I'm not interested in it to do
Yeah.
ACL rehabilitation after a reconstruction. Like that doesn't interest me at all. But
But
what
that
does
is,
interest me
yeah,
is
that is still like when you're working at that level and getting someone back, like you are doing all the
no,
plyos, the
absolutely,
jumping,
yeah,
the
yeah.
laterals. But I know what you mean. Like you're more like wanting to at that very end range. You don't really need a physio
I
degree
just
for
want
that.
to. All I want to grasp is helping someone that
Yeah.
feels something in in the gym, in a squat, in a deadlift, in a bench
Yeah.
press, or whatever it might be. Just helping that person
Feel better. You don't need a degree for that.
yeah, which I don't need a degree for that. Like it's just good coaching,
Yeah.
it's good understanding of biomechanics, it's good load management, it's good rapport building with clients and understanding like all that BPS stuff, expectations and sort of like past lived experiences and
Yeah.
um yeah. I've never yeah, but yeah, I just want to make sure that I for anyone listening to this, like it always has just been performance driven. Like that's all I give a fuck about. So yeah, I would not call myself like a rehab professional in any capacity. Like no
Nah.
fucking chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's so with your latest podcast, the training model,
Yep.
what obviously you're talking about, and that first one was a good one, talking about golf and stuff, and you're slicing into the car parks. What so where are you going now with that? So obviously you brought up you did your Melbourne Strength Culture and built that up. What this is one of the things I was thinking when I was listening, like what made you think doing Melbourne Strength Culture wasn't something that you're doing for you? Like obviously it's a business, but what made you go, fuck, I need to do like my own thing? Obviously you talked about David messaging you because he's probably the nicest guy on the planet. What kicked this all off that you're kind of going down your own thing now and doing this?
Um, there was a few triggers for it, but I've had a very difficult last 18 months to 2 years, just with a huge personal burden that's been ongoing. But
Mhm.
um, thankfully, we're coming out of that, which has been really positive and very excited for the future. But as a result of that, I have felt, and again, this is why I think the BPS thing is just so much greater than just training. But I've always felt that my subjective world, like I have been sort of sitting on the back foot a little bit, or like I like to think about it like sitting on the sidelines. Like I've really wanted to grow strength culture. We've been decently successful in what we've been able to do, but we still haven't achieved all the goals that we want. And that's always going to be my main focus. But
Yeah.
for me personally, with my own career development over the last 18 months to 2 years, I've really felt subjectively that I've just sort of been in the sidelines. And again, a lot of that's just personal overhanging clouds from what I've been going through. But it started this year, but obviously once I got through some of that personal stuff, I was seeing a psychologist and really understanding sort of my tendencies as a worker and my tendencies just around life and better understanding how my brain sort of works a little bit, and how that then represents in my work exploration and expressions of work. So that were probably the two biggest factors that changed for me. The personal stuff went away, or not went away, but it's significantly improved. And then the seeing a psych has really helped me understand sort of like my tendencies and why I find the same patterns happening. And then those two things, it's just sort of like that subjective feeling has been not so much now that I'm sitting on the sidelines, but I'm actually starting to feel like I'm ready to go again, and I'm ready to actually
Mm,
start to push and all of that sort of stuff. And just with how the business has developed, it's not about me anymore. It's the team. It's everything that we
yeah.
do. It's our community and all of that sort of stuff. If I was to just start to go back to the things that I wanted to do under the Strength Culture brand, I think it just muddies all of the progression that we've made. So part of it has been that I now view it as training model is just the shit that I really enjoy doing. All of these
Mm,
discussions, a lot of business related things initially, but eventually it's going to transition to probably 50-50 split of like training, coaching, biomechanics, and as well as the business side of things and helping young personal trainers and young coaches sort of understand the
yeah.
fundamentals of business a little bit more, because that's one of my passions as well. So yeah, training model is just going to become the shit that I really enjoy doing. And some of that will bleed into strength culture, like some of our in-house internships and mentorships and all of that. It's a very big crossover of the two. But then other things where I'm talking about business, or I'm talking about like I'm just speaking to coaches. Like I'm
Yeah.
not trying to find clients and all of that. I want to find 200 coaches that are interested in learning my models and my philosophies and my styles and stuff, because I think it's so beneficial, and a lot of people resonate with it through all my education materials. But trying to do that through strength culture, it just doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense long
And you
term.
could tell on your
So
first one, you could tell it was like listening to that versus a few of the Melbourne Strength Culture ones, you could tell it was like, it's like you could tell it was just you having a chat, and you could tell like you were just like chatting, and like you can tell it's a very personal thing. So it's like yeah, you could just see like you were talking about golf, and then you talk like, and it was almost like you could tell if you were to watch you recording that you were enjoying it and smiling, and
yeah.
obviously you were talking about like the ADD and stuff like, and that's something I went through like last year, and that, and learning that was that one of the things that was like inhibiting your passion projects and stuff, or is that why you went to
Yeah, I wouldn't
psych and
say
that?
that it
Yeah.
inhibits it. For me, it's my tendency is to go aggressively hard for 1 to 2 months, and then it's not even I pull back. It's I actually actively avoid um, stepping back into things, and
Yeah.
and again, I think a lot of that was the personal stuff that was going on, like a lot of
Mm.
my just sort of anxiety around work and anxiety around
Mm.
being at the gym, and like it was a terrible 18 months there for me. But um, my tendencies with work has always been identify a problem, throw everything at it, fix it, progress, whatever it might be, pull back. And what I had built from my education pieces and my personal sort of exploration as a career development sort of thing was launch models of mentorships and CDPs and in-person events and all of that sort of stuff. And that just marries up perfectly with the all or nothing approach that I had,
Yeah.
which is I go hard on marketing for 1 or 2 months.
Are we the fucking
I
same person?
as soon as its start date happens, I just pull completely back. I go completely off social media. I go completely into avoidance mode. I just do the thing of the mentorship, but then I come out at the end of it and I'm burnt the fuck out. And then
Mm.
the next one had to sell, so I'm like, all right, I've got to go again. And then I just fucking boom, and then I'd pull
Are
all the way
we?
back. Yeah.
Fuck. Are we the
So
fuck? Oh.
and then I actually had just burnt myself out over a 3 year period with 3 different explorations of mentorship sort of structures. Speaking to the psych, she's like, if you were to go and do another one, would you expect the same outcome to occur? And I'm like, yeah, 100%. So she's like, if you don't want those outcomes, you have to change the way that you structure what you're doing. And then
Mm.
that has then bled into training model, which is I can be more of myself. I don't have to actively launch things because I'm building short courses that just run. And then
Mm.
I can go and do my exploration of ideas, talk about things, talk about the stuff that I want. But those options for people to jump in and for you to help, they're not these aggressive. Yeah, I've got to launch them to get them off the ground. But once they're up off the ground, they're just rolling. And I don't have to be so aggressive to jump back in and jump back out and jump back in. So I think the whole structure of it is actually just going to play into my favor moving
Yeah.
forward. And that's why I'm no longer running online mentorships. I may do styles of online mentorships, but they'll never be what they were. It's always just going to be I'm going to have a couple of key courses that people can jump into. The first one is up, which is Business 101, which
Mm-hmm.
is just a business foundation course for personal trainers and coaches who are in their first couple of years of coaching and they don't understand marketing, sales, retention, finance, business mindset and all of that sort of stuff. Like it just covers all of that sort of thing. And then I can just help people as they come through. If they've got questions, I can help them out. I can create a little bit more content for it and just throw it in there if I want to, but it's just sitting there and rolling rather than me having to go, fuck, I've
Yeah.
got to launch 3 of these things every year and go. And like, it just doesn't work for me. I just can't work that way. Um,
Yeah. Because
yeah.
and
So
that's one of the things I resonated with as well, is when you said, like, when you were talking about seeing psychologists and stuff, and the because I think you were talking about Angus's one as well, where there's like that hard launch where he just does a hard launch and he runs, and then it's back, and then it's back and forth. And that's where I was like, oh, like, and listening to some of your stuff, I was like, fuck, are we the fucking same person? Because you go in, you burn out, then or you go really hard at it, and then you're like burnt out at that, and then you come back, and it's just this never ending cycle. And I went and saw a psych, and it was one of those things I put on my story, and like, just so everyone could actually go, wow, you don't need to be like, you might be anxious or stressed, but you don't need to be depressed or sad to go and see a psychologist. And it's like, sometimes it's just like wanting to be a bit better. Like, was that what triggered it for you? Or was it like, you did get really upset, or was it like you were just like, fuck, I don't want to keep going in this cycle? Because it's such a stigma these days. Like I even want to
Yeah.
get my podcast, my psychologist, he's going to hop on the podcast because I was like, it's
Oh,
such a
lovely.
stigma that you can't, because he's the same. He's biopsychosocial. Have you heard of Gabor Mate? He's
No.
just, oh, mate, go listen. You'll be on a 3 day bender of all his stuff. Like he's amazing. He's like heaps into the biopsychosocial. Like he talks about how certain in certain countries women have a lot more problems with bone health and stuff, and they happen to be the most stressed, and they have lower life expectancy because of this stress, and it's just nuts when you go down this thing. But and I found him, and he was very similar. He was like all biopsychosocial, like, and he basically said, I know you know it from your work, but the brain and the body aren't two separate things. They're the same thing. When you're stressed, it affects XYZ. And I was just like, I love you. Like,
Yeah.
and we got, and just knowing that, it's like, you don't have to be really depressed to go see a psychologist. And that's what I'm trying to break as well. So when you said, I was like, oh, it'd be good to actually get someone again who's like, oh, no, I did it as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, was
I
it,
think
what
mine
was that?
was
Yeah.
my why I got started with it. Again, I would have over the last 18 months, I would have called myself depressed. I don't know if the clinical diagnosis of what that would be or anything, but
Yeah.
how I felt and how the struggle that I was going through, I think absolutely. And that was one of the key triggers. But for me, it was I had just a full blown breakdown at work in front of the boys
Mm.
when I got back from my holiday, and uh, a lot of that was the overhanging personal stuff. But there was also I was just really struggling with trying to work out what I was doing to be part of everything. And again, it's just that same, now we're just looking at a slightly different chapter of that same
Yeah.
conversation that I've been having with myself of like, I need to set something up that allows me to grow and do the things that I want to do, but can still feed
Yeah.
everything that I want to grow and build. And fun and at the core of it, it's just training model. Like all the things that I do with training model and my content moving forward and all of that, like it's just, and I feel invigorated. I really do. Like I'm still got working through things and all that sort of stuff. But like I haven't felt this way about work for I'd say 3 or 4 years. Like
Really?
really.
Did you
Yeah.
find like you were more self aware to things, or have you always been pretty self aware with those kind of things?
Um I wouldn't self-awareness is something that I it's like a core pillar of everything that I educate around is like you have to look in the mirror, you have to like understand sort of like what your desires are and what you want and all of that sort of thing, and then try to understand like your behaviors and all of that sort of stuff. And I've always seen the importance of it, and I thought I was doing it well, but actually sitting down with someone that's completely objective, that all they do is ask you more questions and
Yeah.
more. They don't offer you advice. They just ask you very penetrating questions that you
Mm.
sit on for weeks on end and think about. And going through that process, I realized that there was so many hidden areas of what I thought about myself that I just never had known.
Mm.
And I probably still wouldn't know had I gone through that. And I don't have all of the answers, but I have enough of the answers to really start to build a path for myself mentally, more than anything. Because again, that subjective world is what creates the objectivity in what we do. And it's the same with training. It's the same like the BPS, fuck, blah, blah, blah. It's like
Yeah.
they are inherently matched. Like you cannot affect the objective without affecting the subjective. You cannot challenge the subjective without affecting the objective. It's the exact same thing all at once. And I feel like I've just gone through that journey myself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And this is why like I've wanted to have these chats is like because so many people see everyone on Instagram and they're like, oh, it's you put everyone on a pedestal. Like, oh, they must have it all good. Like even I saw when Angus did he wrote about how he's journaling and stuff. And like having these chats is like it gives, I think it like obviously a lot of my people are both coaches and athletes, but it's like everyone you talk to has something going on. Like you've got Melbourne Strength Culture, killing it there, whatever. But then you even go, oh yeah, I had this problem and this problem, and I had to fix it. And now I'm feeling better. It's like these kind of chats give people permission to be like, oh yeah, I did feel a bit shitty. Like that's normal. Like you don't have to be fucking happy and killing all the time. So I think it's really cool that you are as open as you are about it as well. Um, so what's next for you? So obviously training model. and then golf. Planning
Yeah,
on
golf, more
all your
golf. I'm
golfing
actually
stuff.
I'm about to become a dad. So
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna.
uh,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah,
I was actually gonna
that's the big
say,
one.
like, yeah, now you're about to fucking become a dad. When's that? When's your
Yeah.
daughter due?
January, sometime in Jan.
Yeah.
Mid-Jan, but yeah,
So
there's
there
a few
goes,
things. Yeah.
there goes all your golf.
Golf, yeah.
Get it in now. Get in 2 months worth, and then you're not gonna have
Um,
another 18
yeah,
years.
that's the big one. But and that's why I'm so thankful that I have had the struggles of the last 18 months.
Mm,
Because it forced me to actually go and work on myself and better understand myself. Because I think that now I am actually in a better position to take
yeah.
that next step into, like, I feel like I've matured a lot personally from going through all that sort of stuff. So very excited to be a dad. Laura and I are so happy that we're in this position that we're in.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously the nerves around all that sort of stuff and the stress, and so
Studying,
we'll just see how that goes. What was that? Studying
studying,
a little bit of yeah,
studying what to do. No, it's good.
yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
And then
Where
the
can
other side
people?
is I just I would like to say if the training model stuff, obviously the business course is up and running, but I am doing a webinar
Mm,
on November the 11th. It's 2 p.m. It's an hour to an hour and a half. It's $59. It's cheap as fucking chips.
can you fucking
It's
plug
the
out there?
second link in my bio, but that is just on center of mass. So
Cool.
if you listen to this and you're keen on opening the door to better understanding human movement from an actual functional perspective of what the system actually does and how it moves and how it does things, you can jump through there. It's the second link in my Instagram bio. I'd highly recommend checking that out. I've already got a couple of people jumping in, but I think that will answer majority of people's questions if they're looking at what I'm talking about and being like, how does this all
Mm.
marry together? Like you'll see it all in one sort of little snippet.
Yeah, cool. I was gonna
So that'll
say
be the other
plug your
one.
stuff, but you plugged it anyway.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Good stuff.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I really
No
appreciate the
worries.
chat.
Thank you. Good stuff. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the baby.
Thank you. Thank you.
See ya.